is election day here, not only here, but across the country. A lot of eyes on some key races. We have some key races on the ballot, from the transit referendum to the mayoral race, city council races, so on, so forth. And here on the program, because we want to give you context. I know you have a lot of questions, and I've seen a lot of these questions, so I wrote them down. I want to make sure your questions are answered while you're watching the stream. We have Professor Amy Sentementes, a political science professor at Queen's University here. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I mentioned these big races across the country. Talking about in New York City, the mayoral race there, Prop 50 in California, Virginia. But here, we have the transit referendum, mayoral race, so on. What does this say? Because early voting numbers were up in Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. What does that say about where we are politically?
I think it speaks broadly to the partisan polarization that we're experiencing in this country right now. I think that divisions are at an all-time high, which can lead people to be more enthusiastic about elections and the opportunity to raise concerns about the issues that affect them. And so I think even in off-year elections that typically see lower turnout, people are connecting those broader issues that they articulated last year, and then they'll plan to again next year in the midterms. They're bringing those to these issues closer to home at the local level, and we're seeing that the politicization of various issues has increased as well. And so a positive aspect of this party polarization is that more people now know about these off-year races, and they can begin to connect the dots about these issues that actually have a more profound impact on their daily lives than some of these contests that are going on in other places, and then in the more major races in midterms and then presidential years that see higher turnout levels.
A question I've gotten, and I've kind of racked my brain about this, especially when it comes to what's happening here locally, is what impact do these local races have on the midterms? And I'm racking my brain. I have my own answers, but you're looking at the data and you're tracking this.
Yeah.
What impact does this year off-year election have on the midterms?
I think we should be cautious about extrapolating too much from this year's race, just because while the turnout rates are higher than usual, which is encouraging, typically the more enthusiastic, more partisan voters turn out in the off years. And so I would be cautious to say that the trends that we're observing now will necessarily translate perfectly to next year. However, we can begin to see voters reflect on the first year of the Trump administration. And so a lot of consultants and politicians are reading these results as an overview of the public's response to the first year of this new administration and their policies that they've worked on. And so polls have shown that the voters still trust the Republicans to handle crime and immigration concerns, even if they may not like the methods that they're using to address these issues. But the economy and perceptions of the economy are more up for grabs than they were a year ago, when voters overwhelmingly identified the Republican Party as more competent to handle those concerns. So when we think about these local races, we see that crime and safety have been spoken about by both Republican and Democratic candidates, and we'll see the results tonight. And I would say that the party who is more victorious today can see that the voters may be in their favor next year going into the midterms. If the Republicans have a better night in national races than is expected, voters on the Democratic side and then Democratic politicians may want to take a closer look about why voters still are more sour on their party overall. While the current administration's approval is low, the Democratic Party still has a low approval rating, even from self-identified Democrats. And so like I said, to be cautious overall, but still use these results to see broader trends about what politicians might want to address in next year's midterms, but also how to approach these issues in a way that is more responsive to public opinion, as opposed to just talking about aggregate economic indicators or aggregate trends pertaining to crime, but to listen to what voters are actually saying and then translate those opinions into concrete policy proposals going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. And looming large in all of this is the government shutdown.
Yes.
How does the shutdown factor into all of this, not just locally, but across the country?
I think especially in Virginia, when we look at the gubernatorial race tonight, that will be a prime reflection on who voters blame for this shutdown overall. Polls show that we see mixed results, but a majority, not an overwhelming majority, but a majority attribute the blame to the Republican Party because we have unified control from the Republicans. They have control of Congress and the White House at this point in time. But at the same time, the Democratic messaging has also fallen short a bit. And so, like I said before, even self-avowed staunch Democrats are not necessarily keen on the Democratic leadership. And I think as we go forward, as the government shutdown continues, as we approach the holiday season, especially, voters will probably be more angry as we continue. And so races that are closer to DC, like I said, those in Virginia especially, we'll see tonight about how the gubernatorial race goes. And then if the Democrats end up picking that governorship up, they probably will use that momentum to speak about the shutdown and try to convince voters that the Republicans should take their concerns about health care into account and reopen the government while still maintaining that coverage from Obamacare that is going to expire.
I have one more question. You obviously are in the classroom. You're dealing with young people. You're dealing with young people that either a lot of them, this is their first, well, maybe
Yes.
second time voting. They're within their first couple of years of voting, and we're coming off the heels of the 2024 election, a big presidential election. But this is also a big election, off-year election. What are some of the conversations that you're having in the classroom, and what are students saying? What are young people saying right now?
I think young voters especially are frustrated by our two-party system. And in the US, we have two major political parties as a result of institutional constraints like single-member electoral districts and then plurality rule that allows the candidate with the most votes to win, not a clear majority, but just getting the more votes than the other opponents on the ballot. Young people are increasingly frustrated with these polarized political parties that force them to pick one of these two sides when the policy proposals and platforms of these parties may not reflect their underlying beliefs. Young people also are frustrated by the concept that we speak about in my class called affective polarization. So this concept illustrates the fact that voters not only disagree on policy proposals and issue positions, but they have a dislike toward members of the other party, and they view those folks as bad people. But younger voters are fighting back, and I'm really encouraged by my students because they are so engaged. And like you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, the turnout rate is higher than usual. It's still low relative to a midterm or a presidential race, but young voters now have a lot more political knowledge than they did previously. Gen Z is quite engaged. They're not as polarized on certain concerns, and I think they have a better grasp on information literacy and the ability to detect misinformation, which has been spread rapidly through social media and other platforms. So I'm hopeful as they go into the ballot box today that they are going to be bringing generational change and also developing this habit of voting going forward, because the more turnout we see, the more legitimate the results will be. And then those candidates that win have a better sense of how they can actually represent their constituents.
Yeah, because they have access to all this tech and these new apps. I mean, I feel like they're just so faster to process a lot of this information than somebody from like a millennial or older generations, Gen X. So, Professor A.B. Sentementes, thank you for your time. Thank you for the context in this conversation. I get a lot of questions that I asked you or questions that I got. So I'm like, well, let me bring them here. And thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.